Okay, it is Tuesday, June 4th, and welcome to week 4 of Introduction to Criminal Law. And it is June 4th already. We're in June, and the quarter will be over. Actually, you'll see that next week the quarter actually ends. So I'm going to share with you in the calendar how that works to remind you again. So now let's take a look at all your assignments up to week 3 are graded. Week 4, I will try to get those done by the end of the week, those that you just submitted a couple of days ago. So let me go ahead and start by sharing my screen. Okay, here we are. You can see the information here that you already know. Let's scroll on down. Of course, your rubrics are in each written assignment. There have been students who said to me that they couldn't see any details in the rubrics. That's because when you read in your grade book, see what the rubric is, and then look under there. There's a section where I have comments telling you what you did good and if you did wrong. Now, if you see a check mark in there and no comments, that means you did everything you were supposed to do in that box. If not, I put in there what you did. One of the most common offenses that most of you did is you didn't do the 3 pages as required. Some of you didn't provide the 3 issues, the 3 credible sources in the body of the paper. Even if you had them as references, it still doesn't count. And they need to be credible references. Some students use the dictionary. Don't use the dictionary. There's so many resources that are available to you that you can utilize that you don't have to use the dictionary. And then make sure you do some research. And so, you know, the other thing is a common issue. Still, some of you insist on doing just references at the end, but no citations. I already provided the video to share with you about the academic integrity. And if you look at that video, again, for those of you who haven't, it's located under the Resources tab. If you go to the Resources tab, which is covered up right there, let's see, there we go. If you click on the Resources tab, there it is right there in front of you. And you can look at it. It's about 4 minutes and 3 seconds, and you'll see why I'm so dogmatic about citations in the body and references at the end. So you want to make sure that you do take a look at that. All right. So here we are. Lectures for week 4 in there. Week 5 will be in here. And it shows you we have one more lecture, which is next Tuesday, and that will be it. We do not have a lecture for week 11. So now, before we go into the week 5 announcement, let's go and take a quick look at the course calendar. Here we are. And you can see this is where we are. A week from today will be the 11th. The class ends the 14th. So that's why I said next week. The class ends. So when you get to Friday, the 7th, you will be 1 week left in this class. We will not be going to the 15th. We will not be going to the 16th. Any assignments not submitted by 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time on the 14th will not, I repeat, will not, and I don't care if they come in 12 or 12:01, I can't help you because it's a school policy and I'm not going to violate the policy. And then you'll see this, if you click on it, it tells you again that the quarter ends at 11:59 p.m. on the 14th. So you don't come to me, as I've had a few students in some of my classes to come and say, I didn't notice that, I didn't see that. Well, shame on you. It's been here since the course started. And so be aware of that. All right, so your assignments for this week, your reading assignment is Chapter 7, and then dealing with drug laws, drunk and drunk driving, distracted driving, hate crimes, and then you got your key terms for practice, and then your practice quiz as well. So you want to, as I stressed to you, make sure you do those. Those help you. Then your initial post is due tonight, dealing with drunk driving. And then, of course, the lecture's taking place now. And then your reply post is due Saturday. And then Sunday, your written assignment that I will be going into details. Has a hate crime been committed? And I'll cover that in the rubric in just a minute. And then these two check marks. One is for the due date for the live keyword. There's the written assignment. And then the second one is your live classroom, and that's due. Again, I remind you guys, you have to get that in by 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time to get 5 points. If you get it on Monday, it's going to be 4 points. If you get it on Tuesday, it's going to be 3 points. You get it on Wednesday, it's going to be 2 points. By the time you get to Thursday, 1 point. If you submit it Friday, it's no points. You've run out. So I've had a few students to want to know why they didn't get points. That is it. I said that earlier, and you know, so unless I had given you permission, and there were some issues that I'm aware of, that I have been made aware of in advance, and that's our course calendar. So I'm going to close that up, and now I want to go back to the course homepage. Here we come. There we go. And so here's our week 5 announcement. All right, let me refresh it so we can. Here we go. So the 5th week, crime against moral values we'll be covering. And to prepare for that, Chapter 7, I sent you the PowerPoint for that as well, of the textbook, A Brief Introduction to Criminal Law, and then deal with these activities. Now, these activities are beneficial to help you to prepare for the actual quizzes that you have coming up. Remember, you have one more quiz coming up, and that's in week 6. That's equivalent to your final exam. You had one in week 3. And then your discussion post, drunk driving, and you know the deadlines I've already mentioned, so I won't repeat it. Written assignment, has a hate crime been committed? Due Sunday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time, and you know what my motto is all about because you remember from week 1 what I shared with you. So now, let's go actually into the module itself. Let's look at the actual assignments. Again, your scenario here is given for the discussion post for the week, and then it tells you what to do in your initial post, and then it tells you what to do in your reply post. Remember, you also have sources that help you here. You have this guide that helps you with discussion posts and other things that can help you. Some of you don't use them. Well, shame on you. It also provides you help with APA, as the module, as the course homepage has as well, as I started talking about it in week 1. So week 5 here, written assignment, has a hate crime been committed? And you're going to use this scenario from, you're going to go from 3 different perspectives. Now, keep in mind that this is a 3-part assignment. You don't choose one, you don't choose the other. All should have citations, and there should be references at the end. Now, you don't have to have a separate reference page. all of your references from all three scenarios can be on one reference page, but citations need to be in every scenario, and you're going to deal with this. And it's going to be a minimum of 1 page. 1 page, not a half a page, double spaced, Roman 12 point. And you're going to cover these issues from the police officer's perspective. Then you're going to deal with the scenario here in part 2. And you're going to deal with these facts from the defense attorney perspective. I've been a professional in this role, and I've been in this role. I never was really a detective, but I was an investigator. So basically, when you look at it from the police officer, these are the initial officers. But detectives are police officers too, but they're the ones who conduct the further investigation. Basically, the police officers make the arrest, gather the information that's needed. Defense attorney, of course, is going to defend the individual that's involved here, okay? And Luke is the defendant here. And then you get to the third part. Again, each part should be a minimum of 1 page. See 1 page here, 1 page here, and separate the pages. Don't just run them all together, okay? And then the third page. Now, you can go beyond that. I don't care. If you want to write more about scene 1 and then cover 2 pages of scene 1, that's okay. But part 2 better also have at least 1 page. I don't care how long your paper is. You just satisfy the minimums. And make sure that you utilize sources, the research. This guide here, again, is to help you with your written assignments, your online library, which helps you with research, which is why I say don't use dictionaries. You can use Black's Law Dictionary. That's a different dictionary, not Webster, rather. And then your APA toolkit to help you. Again, I keep saying, and it's just incredible to me that the more I say about citations in the body, that people want to go with references and think that's satisfying it. You're not going to get any points for that. You're going to lose it. You're either going to have it right or you're not going to have it right. And I told you why. If you look at that video again, you'll see why I stress it. Now, the other thing I want to point out to you is that don't just throw a citation in there. Citations should be provided throughout the body of your paper. And you lose points when I see it you don't. Because as I read your papers, and I read very, very fast, and I recognize and look for certain statements and issues covering, I know that you got that information from your research. You are not the expert in it. And even if you work in the field, you still need to provide some support and research. I do that as a lawyer or professor. If I'm going to provide a statement of information, I go find some sources that are credible to help me get this done, all right? And then, of course, you know what the rule is on the rubric, which is the same thing I just got through talking about. It's due Sunday the 9th, and here is the rubric. And it tells you each part of the assignment. You can lose points here, here, and here. Look at 30 out of the 40 points come from the content. Then you can lose 5 points for not having proper grammar. Use paragraphs. Paragraphs should not be very, very long. Paragraphs should be an average of 5 to 6 sentences. They should have a topic sentence, and you should have the content and daily information. When you switch the subject, do another paragraph. And you lose points in this area here. But then this is where most of you guys lose your points, right here. So I commonly have 35s. I'll have where you lost 3 points because you didn't have citations throughout the body of the paper. Very important, because like I said again, I've identified that students have thrown a citation in. one other thing I need to let you know. Your reference page, I look to see if you're using all of those sources throughout your paper. And I repeat again that for this assignment, you don't have to have 3 reference pages. You just have to have all your references listed from the citations in the body of your paper, okay? And that's important, all right? So that's all I need to tell you about that. Now, let's go back, take a look at the rest of the assignments. So then you have your live classroom lecture, and you know when that is due. I already told you, it's in the calendar, but there it is again, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time, just like it's a written assignment. So it's due as well, all right? So now let's take time and let's look at the content of this. So we're dealing with hate crimes, we're dealing with moral values, DUIs, and enforcement of drug laws. Those of you who have also in my drug and crime class get more details in this, and you know what, it's okay that some of the information that you discover from another class that I teach, you can utilize that information in this. That's fine. That's adequate. No problem. Okay. So here we are. So I'm going to talk about drug laws. I'm going to talk about all 4 of these topics very briefly. And then I'm going to adjourn. I've already covered the practice stuff, which at the end, again, just give you some examples. I already covered discussion, written assignment, and live classroom. So let's talk about drug laws. Drug laws, as you should know, we are in an epidemic, and drugs, not just, even though drugs are used by individuals, but drugs create crime. And I've said this over and over in my criminal law classes. I harp on it all the time in my drugs and crime course, that drugs lead to crime. Individuals commit crimes to support their drug habits. They'll write illegal prescriptions, they will commit thefts, they will commit robberies, burglaries, car thefts, anything you name, credit card fraud, identity theft, all of these different things are involved here. And so our law enforcement agencies have attempted through the war on drugs, as I've talked about in the other class, to minimize the drugs that are available. However, the problem is that as long as there are consumers or customers that the drug dealers have that are the junkies, they will continue to thrive. They're just like any other business, that when there is some control over it, then their control disappears. As we just discovered here in Illinois, that now we're going to have recreational marijuana in our jurisdiction. There are pros and cons on both sides. I am not in favor of any legalization of any kind of drug like marijuana, and definitely not cocaine, and not heroin and those other drugs. But the point of the matter is that they use the funds, the government, to supply services to the people. Well, legalizing some of the drugs, and like I already said before, that on Schedule 1 right now, marijuana is, if you're taking the drug and crime course, you know what I'm talking about, that it is illegal, but the jurisdictions are changing, and even the federal government, while the states have started to change way back in Colorado many years ago, one of the first states. I think Massachusetts is another state, and then there are several others. The federal government still had not made a decision to legalize marijuana, but even now that's starting to change because Congress is operating on the basis that they see what the states are doing, and they want to not have conflicts as far as the law is concerned in the jurisdictions where they are. So, as it says here, that the negative effects of drugs is that it affects individuals' health, it affects their families, their well-being, their ability to be able to be productive citizens, and it says here that some laws exist to protect people from themselves, and this is one of the things that drug laws attempt to do. And these drugs, when they get into a person's body, they totally decimate them. For those of you who are in the drug and crime course, if you, I refer to you this video called Chasing the Dragon. If you were to look at that, which was part of my lecture yesterday, a big part of it, tears would come to your eyes, and you'd see the devastation that drugs have on individuals. It says that there are no victims in a traditional sense when it comes to drug use, possession, or sale. However, there are instances when innocent people are harmed by drug-related crime. I disagree with that statement. There are victims, users, even the individuals themselves who overdose on drugs, who utilize the resources of our first responders in Narcan and Noxolone to try to arrest the drugs and things like that. Very, very, very harmful to our society. And oftentimes there are shootings that take place with the gangs. Do you not know what has created most of the violence is the introduction of drugs? And when the drugs came, they had to get guns, and now they got these semi-automatic and some automatic weapons, rapid fire, to shoot at each other, and they're not good shots, and innocent people are killed. And so it is very, 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 very serious. It says here, as I said already, addicts who commit robbery to obtain money to purchase drugs, and how the law enforcement agencies respond to the use, possession, and sale of illegal drugs and narcotics is one of the things we're going to talk about. So you can see the schedules that I talked about, and it shows you that under Schedule 1, and it tells you, the high potential for abuse, not currently a medical use, lack of demonstrated safety under medical supervision, and you see marijuana. Marijuana is actually moving off of this, as I said, because of what I stated earlier. But coming up, I remember, they have heroin in here. I remember LSD and ecstasy coming out back in the 60s and the early 70s, purple haze. These were chemical drugs that sent people on trips that some of them never came back from. Their mental state was totally changed. And then we have the Schedule 2 dealing with the oxycodone and fentanyl, opium, and cocaine. Now, the Schedule 2 drugs have now kind of merged with some of the Schedule 1 drugs, such as heroin, and now there is an epidemic that is affecting families worldwide. Again, I refer you to the video Chasing the Dragon. If you take a look at it and you see it, you'll understand one of the issues that I'm talking about. Let me see if I can provide you with some details on it. I'll do that. I'll try to remember to do that at the end. And then Schedule 3, you'll notice this is lower. So you're dealing with people are using actual over-the-counter drugs like Tylenol and codeine, Suboxone, Ketamine, anabolic steroids. They're putting these things in their bodies and mixing them with other types of drugs. And, you know, I had a young man when I was 19 years old, worked in a law firm in the mailroom, and this young man used to get high on syrup, actually cough syrups, and that's down at Schedule 5. And he used to drink this stuff. And you just see him, he just drink it, the Vicks, and he would just drink it. And then he would, you know, nod off and stuff like that. All these things are eventually going to take effect on the body and how individuals are living. Valium. And see, and something else that happens is that there are medications that have codeine in them that individuals find themselves getting addicted to. We talk about in that other class that I teach, painkillers and how they're used, oxycodone and fentanyl are mixed in with opium. And also, let me tell you something else. These drugs, they put meat tenderizers in there. They put anything to cut it and stretch it. And so when you buy these drugs, you're not buying pure drugs. You're buying things that are poisonous to your body, rat poison and things like this. And so they talk about the war on drugs, and it started in the 80s, and that idea was to try to deal with the cartels and the various distributors of drugs. And you've lately heard something about trying to build a wall to deal with the drugs coming from Mexico. Not the issue. Most illegal drugs don't come over a wall. They come either underground, literally underground, or the way El Chapo did it, or they come through legitimate checkpoints where they're smuggled in the bodies of individuals, in phony gas tanks, and all kinds of ways. And so the war on drugs is taking place, but it's not really very successful because it says here, it says, although the war on drugs continues today and examples of its success can be cited, the drug problem still exists in the U.S. Illicit drugs will always exist as long as there is a supply and demand. That's what I was talking about earlier. As long as there is a customer, a person who does it. And it's very devastating to them and to, as I said, their community and their families. And so it says here, because the drug problem exists, many have advocated different approaches when it comes to marijuana regulation. And there, again, the legalization of marijuana. There are drug courts where I represented people, individuals were, rather than incarcerated, required to participate in drug programs. The key thing is that this is a physical problem, and it is a mental health or physical health problem, drugs, though the law treats it as illegal activity. And so the point of the matter is that as I conclude in dealing with this section, is that marijuana is constantly being legalized for recreational use. Marijuana has had legitimate medical advantages. Individuals have used it for vision problems such as glaucoma for years, and there continues to be research. And so it says many believe that marijuana should be a Schedule II drug, which would expand its use and research in the medical community. The fact of the matter is that it's probably going to come off all the schedules because of the legalization in many jurisdictions. And so there is what we call the Uniform Controlled Substance Act, which creates the need for states to create their own laws dealing with the possession, delivery, and sale and manufacture of illicit drugs. And some of those we're going to talk about in just a few minutes. If you want to look at the Uniform Criminal Code laws, you can click on that on your own time. So what we talk about is possession. Possession. There are two kinds of possessions. There's what we call, as it says here, actual possession. It's when someone actually has physical control, a bag of cocaine or something on their body, in their pockets. And so as a result of having these drugs on them, they can be arrested for it. Constructive possession is when a person has the right or ability to control them, but it's not on their person, like, for example, in a car or in their house or something like that. But it operates quite frequently in automobiles. Did you not know that the driver is in control of the vehicle, whether they own the vehicle or not? And when they are driving that vehicle, they're in control of all the things that should be in that vehicle and can be held responsible on a constructive possession basis for drugs, weapons, or anything found in that vehicle. Look at what the state of Ohio says is possession of a controlled substance prohibits a person from knowingly possessing a controlled substance or controlled substance analog. Now listen to me. It says knowing. Now let me explain something to you about knowing. You might say, well, suppose somebody in your car has it on them. Yeah, if they have it on their person, that's different, in their pocket or on them. But if they put it in your seats, in your car, you're held responsible in your ashtrays, any of those things, glove compartments, or any part of your vehicle, and you're held responsible for those. Now, what is a controlled substance analog? It says here it's a substance that is similar to a chemical structure in a Schedule 1 or 2 drug, such as that they have what they call designer drugs. These are manufactured, K2 or Spice, which are similar to marijuana and a controlled substance. And one of the things that people do with those types of drugs is that they will find themselves in a situation where they will have these drugs on them. I need to have you to mute your mic. There's somebody whose mic is open. Mute your mic. Hit mute so that it mutes so I can't hear the background noise. Thank you. And so knowingly possessing an illegal drug is like in their coat pocket or on their person anywhere, and you should be aware of it. And the more drugs that you have in your possession, the higher the possible penalty that you could get. And when you start to look at, for example, the state of Michigan dealing with manufacturing, creating, delivering, possessing a controlled substance, considers possession to be delivery if the person has 1,000 grams or more of a Schedule 1 or 2 narcotic with a maximum punishment of life imprisonment. And the reason for that is because when you have a large quantity, it is presumed that it's not for personal use, that it is instead you are a drug dealer, and therefore your penalty is higher because what you do is you distribute those drugs to individuals and take advantage of those people who are junkies or addicts, and they do anything to get the money, and you make money on them. And basically what you do is you put them in bondage. And so when there's a personal amount, then you can get less time, and usually you can get some kind of probation or some kind of help. Michigan law, it says, reduces the maximum punishment to not more than 30 years in imprisonment. In addition to the quantity of drugs, if a person has a scale or either some of those things that you utilize to measure the drugs, plastic baggies. Now, that alone is not it, but it has to be in conjunction with other things. Then those are things that usually drug dealers have in their person. They have scales, they have baggies, and they have all kinds of packaging that they utilize to put the drugs in. So the key thing is the delivery and sale of controlled substances is where you get your very severe sentences because of the fact that you're adversely affecting large numbers of people. Look at what Florida says. Florida statute prohibits acts, penalties, and clearly states a person may not sell, manufacture, or deliver, or possess with intent to sell. And the way that you determine whether it's intent to sell is on the quantity of the drug itself. Manufacturing, how do you manufacture the drugs? You manufacture the drugs, like for example in cooking crack. You have these crack houses that they cook it up in. You have these meth houses where you cook you heat up and mix the chemicals together. And usually there are a lot of fires and explosions that take place. I was the village attorney in a town called Ford Heights, which was known as the crack cocaine capital of the south suburbs. There were many fires where many of the houses caught fire because of the manufacture or cooking of crack cocaine on the premises. And so it is a issue that we continue to fight. And it's only going to take people being delivered from these drugs. And so the various statutes, again. Also, you should be aware of this. If you sell the drugs at a school or a secondary education, you can also receive a very severe penalty. As it says here, it says, dealing with the Florida statute, a person may not sell, manufacture, deliver, possess with intent to sell, manufacture, or deliver a controlled substance in or within 1,000 feet of the real estate where a child care facility, because there are children there, or a public or private elementary or middle or secondary school. And I can tell you this, if you get caught with drugs on university campuses, you're out of there. Rasmussen, for example, you're out. You're out, and you're probably going to be prosecuted severely to the max of the law because it is not going to be tolerated. And then they use places like municipal parks, places where young people hang out and those kind of things. All right. So let's talk about people who drive under the influence or drug driving. It is a problem. Did you not know there are many people killed not by guns? Sure, people are killed by drugs, but people are killed constantly from drunk driving. And it talked about the fact that drunk driving is a serious problem, according to the Centers for Disease Control, CDC. And look at the facts here, and I'm just going to share them. 28 people die each day in motor vehicle crashes involved in alcohol-impaired drivers. You could be driving, all of a sudden someone just crosses over and they kill you or seriously injure you and maybe possibly themselves. And one person dies every 53 minutes in an alcohol-related crash. Alcohol-impaired driving accounts for 31% of all driving fatalities. That's over. That's 1/3 near. A total of 9,967 people died in alcohol-related crashes in 2014, and guess what? Those numbers continue to escalate. Annual financial impact of alcohol, drug-related crashes is in the billions, and it costs you in terms of insurance premiums. It costs you in terms of purchases for vehicles, all kinds of things. And so law enforcement agencies are out there. They have road stops. They will stop people, and sometimes people find themselves while they're driving under the influence, and they have to do road sobriety, field sobriety tests, and they'll do other kind of tests, such as stand on one leg. They'll even talk to the person. So when dealing with alcohol and drugs, you find people whose ability to be able to respond is slower. When I was a lawyer, the rule was a blood alcohol content of 10. It used to be 10, and that changed because of the seriousness of the individuals driving. And so in the 90s, to reduce the number of drunk driving fatalities, the government established 0.08 blood alcohol content, which established that you were drunk. And it's what we call, if you blow that on the breathalyzer, you are driving under the influence in itself, even if you think you can operate your vehicle. A lot of people don't realize, even if they think they can drive, they can't drive as quick as well, they can't stop as well, they can't control their vehicle as well while they're under the influence. And so there's monies on the federal level that are spent constantly to deal with these individuals who are driving under the influence. All states now have 0.08 illegal standard, and that in itself, you are driving under the influence, and you are considered to be impaired, even if you don't think you are. It's not about what you think, it's about the standard that's set out by the law. And then they talk about all 50 states, and they talk about some of the things dealing with alcohol. Now, some states have made laws that make it illegal for persons to be under the physical control of a vehicle while under influence. For example, as they say in the state of Ohio, having physical control of a vehicle while under influence makes it illegal for an impaired person to be physically controlled of a vehicle. And this is what that means. This is the definition of physical control of a vehicle. Pay close attention. Being in the driver's position of the front seat or in the driver's position of a streetcar or trolley, and having possession of the vehicle. So the keys or other devices. So what happens, you're sitting in the car and you're driving under influence and you stop the car and you still have the key in the ignition or in your hand and you're driving under the influence, then in that case, then the law says that you are in physical control of a vehicle, and you can be held accountable under the law for that. It says when drunk drivers killed, they are not charged with intentional homicide because it was not done, but due to their intoxication and lack of intent. When drunk drivers cause death, the criminal act is often referred to as a homicide by intoxicated use of a motor vehicle, or we use sometimes involuntary manslaughter as well. So to prove a homicide by intoxicated, it must be shown that the defendant first operated the motor vehicle while under the influence of a drug or a blood alcohol content of at least 0.08, as I said, or the driver is considered impaired, and then it causes the death of another. So that could be a passenger as well. So it is very important that you understand um, the situation. This is a very serious issue. And sitting in a vehicle, I know of a famous baseball player who was in a field in a car, knocked out drunk, with the keys in the ignition, and the car was moving, but he was driving under influence or in physical control of the vehicle, and the consequences were severe for him. So field sobriety tests are usually the way that they determine whether or not a person is in control or not. So look, driving behavior. So if you see people weaving, driving through a traffic signal, striking the curb. I remember once I was driving down a busy street in Chicago, 95th Street to be exact, and I noticed it was really early in the morning. It was like about 4 in the morning, and a car was in front of me, and that car was going from one curb to the other curb, which meant that they were also crossing over into the traffic going the opposite direction. And I took down the plate, and I called the police and tried to stay behind that person as much as I could. And then finally the police came and they pulled that person over. Now, somebody says, well, was that your business? Sure it was, because that person could kill an innocent person or either themselves. So yes, every one of us should respond accordingly. So now let's take a look at this. Driver's physical appearance, such as odors, red or bloodshot eyes, slurred speech. Now, I have seen situations where slurred speech alone is not adequate, because I have seen stroke victims who were under attack, and then they were initially charged with driving under influence, but then it was established that they were having a stroke, and the charges were dismissed. But these generally are some indicators that a person is driving under the influence. Driver's performance of the field sobriety test, such as the horizontal gaze test, the walk and turn test, the one-leg stand test. Everybody's kind of familiar with that one. And these are different tests that are done in the field to determine whether a person is under the influence. Even asking the person some questions may also. And so here are a number of things. Now, you should be aware that if you are stopped and you refuse to take the breathalyzer, then every state has what we call an implied consent law, which means arrested and impaired drivers are given the option to consent to the test. And it simply means that if you operate a motor vehicle, you automatically give consent by doing so. Penalties are increased if you refuse to take the test. And if you refuse to do so, your licenses can be not just suspended, but revoked, and for long periods of time. And you can be arrested as well. So here, if you look at the warrant requirements that the Supreme Court entered into United States in the Supreme Court with Missouri versus McNeely in 2013, there were a lot of things that happened, and you could take time to look at that. But before McNeely came, the law enforcement officer could force a blood draw because of the scientifically established rapid I can't say it, dissipation of alcohol in a drunk person's body, and because it was an exigent circumstance. But the McNeely case changed that, and that today law enforcement officers have to get a warrant before they can do a blood draw. It was considered to be invasive, and that's why it was done. It was a privacy issue that's involved. When you get a chance to read it, you'll see what it is all about. So it says today officers must get a warrant to force a blood draw in drunk driving cases unless there are some exigent circumstances, that is, circumstances that require immediate attention will then change that. All right, but you need to read that to get details on that. Finally, drugged driving. Drug driving is when a person is driving while under the influence of illicit drugs or the misuse of prescription drugs. Now, you should also pay attention to the warnings that are on your medication. Almost every medication comes with a warning that is based upon what the lawyers had the prescription manufacturers to put on their drugs, that it may cause you to be, I should say, erratic, or it may make you drowsy or something like that. But the key thing is that most of the drug driving involve individuals who are high on illegal drugs, or either they have misused prescription drugs, as you find out when you start to discover the seriousness of using drugs and how it's mixed with other chemicals, and individuals are impaired and sometimes losing their lives. It says, unlike alcohol, it's difficult to measure the quantity of drugs. So most states have what we call illegal per se laws prohibiting drivers from any quantity of illicit drugs in their system. And if any amount of marijuana, cocaine, even though it's legalized, it's just like driving with alcohol, you still can be impaired, is in the person's blood, the driver is guilty of driving under the influence of or drugged driving. And the key thing is that the same results could happen with drug driving as with drunk driving, where people are killed. And you can take time to watch this video. I'm not going to obviously go through it because we don't have much more time left here. And then there is distracted driving. Now, you know about distracted driving, everybody. No texting while driving. You should have hands-free devices in cars. One of the things I really don't like is I've noticed that now they have these phone clip things that you can put up, and they're on your dash. And to me, that promotes distracted driving. Even some of those GPSs that are there, because it only takes a second to deal with that, where a person can run over a person that may be walking. Even distracted driving is, and some people don't realize it, talking or texting on your phone, eating and drinking, talking to people in your vehicle, and your stereo equipment, or anything that takes your attention off of the road is something that creates distracted driving. And unfortunately, there's a lot of that going on. In this video, when you get a chance, take a look at it. You'll see what I'm talking about. There are accidents that take place quite frequently, where individuals are constantly finding themselves in accidents because they're trying to text while driving. And many states, including Illinois, such as Wisconsin statute, says inattentive driving makes it illegal for any person driving a vehicle to be engaged or occupied with any activity other than driving the vehicle that interferes or reasonably interferes with the person's ability to drive the vehicle safely. So distracted driving in Illinois, for example, it says electronic communication devices that prohibit a person from operating a motor vehicle while using electronic communication is defined as, and this is what an electronic device is, including but not limited to a handheld wireless phone, a handheld personal digital assistant, or portable or mobile computer, but does not include a global positioning system, a GPS. I already said some of those things Okay, they're going to eventually probably change that. I can tell you, I'm make a prediction. Or navigation systems in a device that physically electronically integrated into the vehicle. So what they're saying is that the key thing is that you don't want to be distracted by something that's taking your eyes off of the road itself, because all it takes is a second and someone could be seriously injured or killed. People run into the back of cars all the time. So, and it says here in our state, penalties are increased if a driver is involved in a crash that results in great bodily harm, permanent disability, disfigurement, or death. And an approximate cause of that was dealing in distracted driving. So it's an issue. It's an issue. There are many times that I've driven past people and I see them with their cell phones up. Do you know, not legally, and we've all been probably guilty of this, is that you stop at a stoplight or something and then you take your phone and look at it. Even that is illegal, because you need to be focusing on the road while you're in that car driving. It says, if a police officer clearly sees a motorist holding their cell phone up and manipulating the letters with their thumbs or fingers, for example, texting or composing a message, email, whatever, that's it. That's prima facie distracted driving. So, but the point of the matter is just like the seatbelt issue. There were people who said, the seatbelts don't hurt. Well, now there's laws that say you must wear a seatbelt. The same kind of thing is saying now about cell phones and things like that. Okay, stay off your phones while you're driving. Stop texting, those kinds of things. The final thing that I want to talk about is hate crimes. In our society today, unfortunately, and also one of the reasons that I attribute, and I've just got to tell it like it is that the present administration that is at the head of this government seems to, I don't know how to say it, takes a lackadaisical position when it comes to dealing with hate crimes, and demonstrated by what happened in, I believe it was South Carolina, Charleston, I believe it was, where the young lady was killed, saying that there were fine people on both sides. Let me tell you something. If you are dealing with killing people because of their race or hurting that person, sex, national origin, religious beliefs, it hits the category of a hate crime. And normal crimes such as batteries or aggravated batteries are elevated to a higher level. The federal government has dealt with this going back to 1968 when Lyndon Baines Johnson came out with 18 United States Code Section 249, which made it a crime to use or threaten to use force against a person because of their race, color, religion, or national origin. Now we include sexual preference. Since then, federal hate crime legislation has evolved to include additional classes such as sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, and so forth. That's what I was saying that. Now, many states, including Illinois, it says 45 out of 50 states now have hate crime laws. And simple crimes are elevated and the penalty is increased because you're doing it because of one of those reasons, such as the race, sex, national origin, and so forth. Look at what it says in Wisconsin. It says penalty crimes committed against certain person or property which prohibits intentionally committing a crime, which intentionally commits a crime against another and selecting the person or their property in whole or in part because of the person's belief or perception regarding the race, religion, color, disability, sexual orientation, national origin, ancestry, whether or not it was that person's belief was correct. The point of the matter is that it elevates the crime, and you can receive more time. And I'm not going to go through, spend a lot of time here. It is simply as what I just said a few minutes ago. Now, let's talk about what happened in the Wisconsin versus Mitchell. Wisconsin versus Mitchell created statutes across the country regarding criminal enhancement of hate crimes. In the United States Supreme Court case of Wisconsin versus Mitchell in 1993, the defendant, an African American, was sentenced to 2 additional years in prison for intentionally targeting and instigating a fight against a white victim. His intent to target a white victim was demonstrated by the words he used. There goes a white boy and we're going to get him, or either vice versa. There's a black person and a white person says we're going to get him. Just before the victim was chased down and battered, Mitchell was convicted of aggravated battery and in violation of the Wisconsin hate crime law because he intentionally selected the victim because of their race. But he argued that the penalty of enhancing violated his free speech rights. Supreme Court said nope, and said that Mitchell's right to free speech ended when he carried out the act. And I agree with the Supreme Court there. Free speech and thought of vile thoughts, it says, are protected, but they may not violate, but they may violate hate crime laws when the thoughts are turned into action. So when you do something, and that's the point. So when you get a chance to read the Wisconsin versus Mitchell case, and you'll find out. So after Mitchell, states created laws that increased the penalty for hate crimes. For example, in Florida, it says evidence prejudice while committing offense. Some of the following sentence enhancements in hate crimes, these are some of the things. A misdemeanor of the second degree is reclassified to a misdemeanor of the first. So what you do is you elevate the crimes for each of these various offenses. All right? So hate crime is something that you can discover and learn quite a bit about. If you look at the video, Journey to Hate Crime Millennium, you'll see more details about what hate crime is. All right? So now the last thing I want to look at is these key terms. Again, just very briefly, and I do mean very briefly because we're out of time. Click on this, and let's go to flashcards, and probably I'm going to have to, allow it. And then what happens is the flashcards come out, and then let me move this. Whoops. I didn't mean to do that. I want to go back. I want to go back to this. Let me take it back. Okay. Here we go. Back to flashcards. Okay, let me go back and come back into it. Let me go back and stop sharing, and then I'll come back to it. Okay, now let's go back to it. Let me share it again. Okay, let's go to Firefox. Okay. Now let's go back. And let's go back into this. Then we'll get back in there. Okay, here we go. There we go. So now, let's go back into week 5. and the lesson content. Okay, here we go. So now we can go back down here. Scroll all the way down to the bottom. And key terms. So we click on this. Don't skip them. All right, so now it's going to open up again. Kind of slow. There we go. Okay, so then let's take a look at flashcards. Click on flashcards. I don't know what's going on. It's going so slow. Okay, I don't know what happened. Well, anyway, going back to all of this. There we go. Oh, I see what happened. I hate that when it happens. We click on some of these things, so I didn't want to go back to that. Well, anyway, in your week, make sure that you go down and you check all of those different things. Oh, there it is. Okay, here we go. So it says occurs in instances where a person has the right or ability to control the item, but it's not in their possession. You flip the card over, and you find that. So you could do that same thing for each of these. And then you'll go down, and again, you same thing with the practice exams. I've shown you over and over and over how to do those things. As I try to reopen this tab and try to get back one more time so I can show you what I'm looking for. And let's go into 150. Here we go. Let's go to 5. And the lesson content. There we go. All right. So now I got to share this so you can see it. Otherwise, you won't see it. There we go. Okay, so now come back down here. Now you can see it. So then you see the key terms. Click on key terms. And then click on flashcards. Let's fix that. Allow them. And here we go. Okay, so then it tells you various questions that you can handle in terms of dealing with it. So there we go, we moved that. So the 3 standardized tests of horizontal gaze or HGN stand, walk and turn, one-legged OLS. And then what do we call these? These are the field sobriety tests. Okay, and then you go to the next one. And then you do each of those like that. Okay? All right, so then you leave out of that, and then it takes you back. And then you go down and you do the same thing for each of these sections. This is to help you practice. Driving practice for blood draws. You can go through and deal with the same thing, and then identify the drug schedule for practice. And this is a dragging thing. This is where you come, and then if you drag them, You start the activity where you can determine what drugs, Schedule 1, drugs that lead to limited physical or psychological dependence, might be Schedule 5. Okay, you see that. Drugs that have no accepted medical use in the United States, these are probably Schedule 1s. Drugs that have the least potential for physical or psychological dependence, these are probably going to be Schedule 4s. Drugs that have a lower potential for abuse but may lead to moderate dependence. And then there you go. So that's how you do it. And then if you submit them, then it tells you the answer was almost right. So you have 2 attempts, and then you can try it back again and go back. All right. So it'll tell you when you get all of them right. So I'm not going to stick with that. So the key thing is then at the bottom, and the last thing is that practice quiz. Do not forsake the practice quiz. And you're going to deal with that by clicking on this. And then you start the activity. And then, you know, according to the federal law, marijuana is a what drug? If you remember what it is. So it's 1 right now. So, and that's it. So you can go through those different scenarios and so forth. Okay, so I'm done. And I want to stop sharing. And I want to give you a key phrase. DUI. That's it. DUI. Now, one of the things that I said I wanted to do is I wanted to give you this link. I'm going to type it in the chat box, but first I got to go back and pull it up. Give me a minute. Let me go to Firefox. Okay, let me pull up what I want to see, and I'm going to show it to you. I want to give you the link so you can take a look at it on your own. And that's Chasing the Dragon. Okay, it's here. And it's week 5. And it's in the lesson content. So you can't get this, but I'm going to give you the link. Oh, I gave you the wrong class. I'm sorry, that's J280. I want to take you to J250. There we go. I knew something was wrong there. Okay. Here it is. Okay. Okay, I want to copy this. Let's see if I can. Yeah, there we go. Copy it. Okay. So now I want to go back into the classroom. And here's the link. Okay. And to everyone. Okay, let's go back to the chat box. Trying to get it to everyone here. Okay. And that is entered. You can't see it, I don't think. Copy. Then I want to paste it. Okay. Okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to email it to everybody. That's what I'll do. Yeah, I'll email it to you. Okay, so then you'll see it then. All right, so with that, I'm going to say good night and end this session.